Tatiana Kalganova from Brunel University, London. You are listening for course of lectures on philosophical principles applied to research process. In this particular lecture, we are going to explore a number of philosophical principles and how these principles we can apply to analysis of research process. The aim of this lecture is to understand the philosophical principles applied to research process. At the end of the lecture, you will understand the major theoretical underpinnings and philosophical principles in research process and how to apply these definitions, theoretical principles, to analysis of research process. Before we starting, we select the high-quality journal paper in your research area. First of all, it's a start of 8 or review research paper for the area where you're working on. Secondly, you need to have a 3 research journal papers related to your work. And moreover, we are not learning, applying our philosophical principles to somebody else's research work, but also we think about your dissertation or recently completed projects. Now, let's consider what philosophical principles are important for us when we start to look from perspective of research process. There are 6 of them, which will influence the way how we will evaluate our research process. First is epistemology and ontology, objectivity, subjectivity, reality and social construction, causation, validity and generalization. Let's get back and start to understand the basics. What is ontology? What is epistemology? Ontology is the nature of reality and trying to answer the question, what is reality? Epistemology is the theory of the knowledge. So it tries to answer how we know reality and what it does. Looking on ontology and epistemology, there are 2 main directions of subjectivism and objectivism who look completely differently into ontology and epistemology. Considering subjectivism, we are trying to answer and consider that reality is socially constructed, dependent on perspective of the subject, of a person views. In this particular case, when we start to look on epistemology, we are looking at interpretive understanding of behaviors in socially constructed environment. When we started to look into objectivism, we started to look from ontological point of view that reality is independent of the mind. It's regardless of who is doing research, how they are doing, and what is concentration on. We are looking on reality, which is independent of the mind. It means that whoever is doing this, they will always get to exactly the same reality description. And consequently, epistemology will be looking on causal laws, induction and deduction. Considering these 2, epistemology and ontology, these are 2 the most central concepts in philosophical science and social society. Social research, they provide us the basics on how we view reality and how we are trying to tackle the questions and understand how reality is recognized. Epistemology. Epistemology is the branch of philosophy that studies knowledge. It is interested in regions of this and looking on the nature of the knowing. Basically, it's trying to understand how knowledge is generated. In other cases, speaking in our research terminology, we will be saying how we can answer the question, our research question, what is research process and how do we apply this process for answering this particular research question. It leads to choose some certain methods over others. What are methods the most common, what methods is better to use, and we are looking for applying for different questions. It attempts also to answer some basic questions. What distinguishes true, which is adequate knowledge, from the false, inadequate knowledge? So basically, when we started to speak about and answering one particular research question, we need to make sure that our answer is providing the true, adequate knowledge, which could be applied later on and used widely. And this will bring us issues of scientific methodology. How are we going to generate our research scientific methodology to ensure that we are answering our research questions in such way that it leads to distinguish our true adequate knowledge? How can we develop the theories or models that are better than competing theories? When we are trying to have and solve a problem, when we are trying to consider one particular research process of answering our one research question, our inquiry, how are we going to construct our research method in such way that it provides us the better solution for true and adequate knowledge? Ontology. Ontology is considering that it's the science of being, it's the study of being. It raises such questions: what is nature of reality? Is it objective, subjective reality, and how we are considering them? It also claims the assumptions and particular approach in social inquiry and makes about the nature of social reality. It concentrates on investigation of social reality and how we consider this. It looks about what exists, what it looks like, what units make it up, and how they interact with each other, and what counts as evidence. Basically, it concentrates on construction of social reality, of its nature, and how we are going to build the process to ensure that our research questions is adequately answered. One of the most important principles and philosophical principles which we are going to use in applied analysis of our research process is objectivity. It relates to perceived or unperceived object. When we speak about a study of our research, we always have one object of study, and this object could be classified as perceived or unperceived. The object is something that presumably exists independent of us, of our perception and understanding. It's other means, if we have one object of study, regardless who is going to do research, we are going to come back to exactly the same conclusions, regardless whichever you build one research method or another one. We are considering the object as be there, and it's not the object which is perceived. So objectivity is typically associated with ideas such as reality, truth, and reliability. In other words, when we start to speak about objective solutions, objective data, we are speaking about the solutions which they exist regardless of our opinion or opinion someone else. Subjectivity. Subjectivity, it relates to perceiving the object and normally the person. So we are looking on understanding of socially constructed reality and how this influence on our behavior. We have started to look on perceiving the object suffering from jaundice, for example, and could seem to perceive an object as yellow when the object is not actually yellow. So our opinion of the colors on case study groups on another one will be bringing different understanding of different colors. For example, I would, as a person, distinguish between different colors. I would say this is dark blue and this is light blue. When we start to speak about exactly the same question about the color for the child, he may just generalize this and then say the answer is blue for the both cases. So in our case, when we start to speak about subjectivity, the output of this, it depends on people's opinion. And in this particular case, the opinion is matter of mine opinion on somebody else when we start to have a look and identify the colors. Consequently, because subjectivity relies on perceiving subject based on somebody else's opinion and socially constructed reality using it, the term subjective very often indicates the possibility of error. And usually in this particular case, we need to take particular care when we start to construct research method in such way to ensure that this error has been eliminated. When we start to have a look on designing our research method, we need to take into account objectivity and subjectivity very closely. First of all, we need to consider the given research question. What is the subject of our research? Is it subjective or objective? After that, we start to construct the research method in such a way that subjectivity issues have been removed. For example, if I'm going to do social studies, subject of my investigations could be socially constructed environment such as a school. In this case, my subject consider it as a very much subjective behavior, and and I'm going to be analyzing socially constructed reality. In this particular case, what does it mean? That I need to apply the research methods and techniques in such a way that I will try to remove subjectivity element out of my data of a nature of my data. For example, in this particular case, I may choose to use several qualitative methods to ensure that different qualitative methods can provide exactly the same conclusion when I started to look on analysis of the school behavior. Or alternatively, I may decide to use triangulated research when I will try to combine two types of methods such as qualitative and quantitative to ensure that both methods will support my research question and answer. In this particular case, I will be able to define my answer on my questions more clearly. Let's have a look how we are going to design our questions. One of the hints which I would like to give you, when we start to look on social objectivity and subjectivity, we would like to use induction and deductional structural description, which we've done in previous lectures, and design our research method considering the principles of subjectivity and objectivity. Before we can do this, we need to understand how subjectivity, the meanings of subjectivity and objectivity applied to research process. Let's have a look at an example. Assume that you're doing some research, mini project, and you've been given the data, which is depicted here. And research question which you are looking on this, which has been emerging having the data, is are the horizontal line parallel or do they slope? This is your research question, and you're trying to answer this research question and construct the research process. Can you take a minute, maybe pause this lecture, have a look on your data, and try to build up your sequence using induction, non-deduction visualization? How would you try to answer this question in such a way so that your research method become objective? What type of techniques you're going to use which will help you to eliminate the element of subjectivity? Before you're doing this, I was wondering, what do you think the answer would be looking on this picture? You constructed your research process for answering this research question. Let's have a look. Did you take into account everything necessary to eliminate subjectivity? Remember, our research question is, are the horizontal lines parallel or do they slope? Can you just double check your induction, deduction, graphical representation of this research process? Did you define your data correctly? In this particular case, our research question is, are the horizontal lines parallel or do they slope? Our data is graphical representation of this picture. We don't have anything else, no any numbers, anything else, just graphical representation of this. We can use it using on the screen or we can print it out, but we have nothing else except this data and we need to get this answer question. In your research process, did you define the meaning of parallel lines? If you haven't, how would you try to double check your hypothesis and everything? Definition of parallel lines comes together with hypothesis and definition of them. Have you considered the accuracy of methods of measurements when we're trying to define the parallel lines? What will be your boundaries of your research, making sure that you will answer them correctly? And the most importantly, when you are trying to construct your research method, have you eliminated the subjectivity during the process of measurements to ensure that regardless what type of tools you're going to use, what type of techniques you're going to use in your research method, you will be still getting exactly the same results. Do these parallel lines slope or they really parallel? Let's have a look at another example. We are looking on another example, but we are not looking from point of view trying to answer this question. We are trying to look from point of view constructing the research process in such way that it brings out the levels of objectivity and the correct level. Is this a square? Before you're trying to attempt to answer, construct your research question, you're trying to answer this question. So again, try to take the paper, use induction, deduction, graphical representation, and write it down research process in such way as you're trying to answer this research question. Take your time, put on pause, and I will come back. I will be with you in a minute. You've done a little bit of work. You were looking on research question and trying to answer this. In front of you now should be induction and deduction, a graphical representation of a process. Let's double check if you put all points right. Have you defined the data? What is your data? Have you specified that your data is this graphical representation or not? Have you put definition of meaning of learning parallel lines? I would hope that from learning on our mistakes from previous example, you will be putting already definitions in place when you started to construct your research process. Have you considered the accuracy of the methods? Have you started to eliminate objectivity and subjectivity when you started to look on them? If you choose to have group observations, how did you eliminate subjectivity having social constructed or qualitative methods? We learned a little bit about construction of our research process. We understood that we need to make sure before we construct our techniques and use different techniques, we need to make sure that we put definitions. We are trying to put the boundaries. We're trying to put hypotheses, making sure that we are trying to answer these questions inside of particular boundaries. We need to take into account such things as accuracy. We started to look on objectivity, subjectivity obtained out of this. Let's have a look next example. How many black dots can you see? Again, this is the only data we have. Let's have a look exactly the same process. Take the paper, draw induction and deduction or deduction process, graphical representation to find out how you're going to answer this research question to ensure that you have eliminated subjectivity and objectivity in this, but to get this process and answer. Take your time, do your work, and we will review what main issues you need to consider when you're building up. I hope you had a little bit of time, and you may find this is not very easy to look into this, because as in previous examples, we were using quite well such tools as definitions or formulation of hypotheses to make sure that we are eliminating some level of subjectivity and defining the boundaries in which we are trying to answer the question. In this particular case, this would not help us, our definition of parallel lines, because there is no such related questions answer here. In relation to this, some of you may have a different answer when you start to count the number of dots. You may have several people in your room, and everyone will be providing different answers. What can you do when you start to use such type of technique as survey to count the black dots? What can you do to eliminate subjectivity of this level, especially at this current stage when everyone may say number of black dots is completely different? What was your process of counting? Have you eliminated subjectivity using run-on survey? Have you looked on accuracy of methods? Have you used a specific techniques, qualitative, quantitative analysis? Have you combined different type of techniques like qualitative and quantitative insight to ensure you will have objective answer? Just in case, if you will be trying to answer this question and you are not sure what type of answer you will, so try to reconstruct your research process in such way, making sure that you will get correct answer. The correct answer here, we have no black dots. Did you get this answer? No? Get back to construction of research process and have a look where the level of subjectivity you bring to such case that your answer is different from one which is correct. So far, we started to look on the issues of implying subjectivity in the socially constructed environment. And we need to start to understand a little bit more this influence. For example, what is the speed of this movement in this particular example? We have only video representation of this, and this will be our data. Can you try to construct the research process in such way that you will try to eliminate subjectivity out of research question and ensure that whoever is going to do this analysis and trying to answer this particular research question, everyone will get to the same answer. Take your time, get pen and paper, write it down, induction, deduction based structural research process description. Let's back and revise what you've done correctly or not. Now, you started to look already on this data. You started to have a look on this moving image and trying to understand what is the speed of movements. And when you started to look into this, you may choose different ways to do this. You may choose the way to start answering this question to generate several hypotheses. I will be saying about this, did you generate one or two hypotheses? In my case, I will be saying, is this image moving or not? This will be my first hypothesis. If it's moving, what speed? In this particular case, if I'll start to break down and show different hypotheses, I have better chances to answer one after another one and provide more correct explanations. When we started to look on answering like, is this moving or not, again, we start to apply such type of methods as survey, interviews of the people which were looking on this image. If you started to go in this direction, how would you eliminate subjectivity building up this research method? In my case, if I'll try to answer this question and I will start to define the focus group, which we are trying to answer and define whichever image is moving or not and what is the speed of a movement, according to my hypothesis, I will try to make sure I use two different techniques, qualitative techniques, to support one of my hypotheses, to ensure that I remove subjectivity element inside of each different qualitative technique. If I'm using two qualitative techniques, different qualitative techniques, to answer exactly the same question, it means I'm trying to remove element of subjectivity and bring solution to objective conclusion. In order to do this, I need to make sure each of my techniques provide exactly the same answer. This is a classical example, and it's quite easy to do. But what is important and what is difficult, in our previous questions and previous tasks, you started to look on your new answers very often beforehand. Here is another example of elephant. And the question is, how many legs does elephant have? Normally, naturally, when I ask you this question, without looking on the elephant, you will tell me straight away it's 4. Because this is your general knowledge, you had it. You would not even assume that there are some other possible answers can be. Remember, the only data we have at the moment trying to answer this question is this image. Again, this is a tricky process. Try to construct research method using induction or deduction visual description of this in such way that it's become objective. in such way so that anyone else is trying to answer this question using your particular research method design, they will come to exactly the same conclusion. Take your time, take pen and paper, try to answer first and construct research question. We will consider this more details just in a second. Let's have a look if you've done it correctly. What is your answer? Is your answer is 4? In this case, I would like to act as opponent of a question, and my answer for this question will be 5, because I can count a number of flags staying on the ground. I'm pretty sure when you're trying to give me answer 4, you were using general knowledge and maybe looking another way. Was your answer is not 4? Was your answer is 5? In this case, I as an opponent will give you another one. You are telling me that there are 5 legs in the elephant, but my answer will be to you, there are 4 of them, because I can count them without looking on the ground. Can you see that we can start to argue with you non-stop about the number of legs? 4 or 5, and both points can be valid. I can look on from the top and speaking about the leg growing from our body of an elephant, and I will be correct saying that there are 4 of them. At the same time, I can argue about this and saying that the leg is something that it stays on the ground, and once we start to count, it will be 5. We can continuously have discussion about this for 1 hour, 2 hours, about how many legs have elephant. When we start to argue about this and everyone's trying to put their own opinion, what does it mean? It means none of our research process we construct, they are objective enough to provide the correct answers. It means that our research processes which we develop, they have a weaknesses. They look on subjectivity, either looking on the elephant as a data only from one point of view, either from the bottom or to the top. But we do not provide objective research process in such way that everyone can agree what is going, how many legs we have in elephant. So we have a problem with current method. I'm wrong and you are wrong. We cannot get the answer. We can argue with you, and once the argument comes, it means there is some rooms for improvement of our research method to ensure we're removing subjectivity issues. And the problem is subjectivity. How do we eliminate subjectivity? How to ensure our research process is correct? In this particular case, we start to think about what are our the main disagreement point. In our case, disagreement point lies in definition. I am defining, for example, that the leg of the elephant will be growing from the body, and that's why I will be count the number of legs. You may define as the leg is the one standing on the ground, and we will be counting as a 5. As a result, because our definition has not been covered all conditions necessary, we will be arriving to the wrong conclusions, and it will be subjective to particular definition. In this particular case, our problem was that we haven't provided definition to ensure we cover all boundaries for which are involved in definition. What is happening? I am providing definition, and my definition is each of the limbs on which a person or animal walks and stands, and it grows from the body. In this particular definition, what we did, we combined 2 different points together. We combine our vision of the leg growing from the leg, from the body, and at the same we combine definition of the leg growing from the ground. We started to eliminate and remove our subjective opinion once we identify what are the nature of this. Once we started to eliminate and provide definition, let's have a look at our analysis in exactly the same way how we did it before, looking from top point of view and down point of view. For example, if I'm saying that I need to double check two hypotheses, is that the limb is growing from the body. This is my first limb, second limb. Is it correct limb? No. Is it the correct limb? Does it stand on the feet? No. Does this limb stand on the feet and ground? No. The only limb goes from the body, stands on the ground, is the last one. You may say you are wrong. Let's start to have a look from different point of view. Let's start to have a look from bottom to the top and see, can we get the same answer? This will be my second technique, which I'm going to use to justify my answer. Let's have a look. This is my ground, and this is my first limb. It goes from the ground. Does it get to the body? No, it's not a limb, according to our definition. Secondly, this is the limb. It's on the ground. Does it get to the body? No. In this particular case, according to our definition, our boundaries, which we started to set up to ensure that we provide the objective method, the answer will be no. What about the third one? What about the fourth one? Let's get back to the last one. It starts from the ground. It gets to the body. Again, according to our definition, we started to have a number of legs. And can we see, instead of 4 or 5, we started to have a number 1. Can you see, based on this example, if we eliminate subjectivity, very often our answer to our research question, which is how many legs does this elephant have, can bring completely different answer. And once we eliminated subjectivity element, what did we get? We get the answer of only 1 leg. Obviously, it's against of your general knowledge. You will be surprised about what's going on there. But the problem is, because we have done already definition, we eliminated subjectivity elements out of this, for this particular data, it will be something which surprises you and brings something new. This is how sometimes research is done. When you have particular data, you're looking on them from one point of view, from another one, looking definitions and anything. You check and check again, and you get some results which you never expected to get. And it surprises you at this first time, providing that elephant will have only 1 leg in this particular case. How can he stand? But once you eliminate inside of your research process maximum possible subjectivity, it brings you to next level to bring completely new discovery, which may surprise all research community and scientists. This is typical examples. If you remember, maybe a couple of years ago, this dress took the social media by storm. It was thousands of conversations arguing and looking, what is the color of this dress? This is good brainstorming topic, and a lot of arguments and ideas was coming out of this. If you don't trust me, go to internet, social media, double check what they say when what they're thinking about the color. Here is for you the task. Start to have a look on construction of research process, answering the research question, what color is the dress, in such a way to ensure that all these arguments has been built so far on the internet about discussions and conversations of the color of the dress, bring whatever everyone speaks will bring exactly the same answer. So everyone will agree with this particular answer. Do you think, after elephant example, can you crack the dress color problem? I'm sure you do. Try to do this now. Now, we've been looking on objectivity, subjectivity so far, and we just started to understand the importance of objectivity, subjectivity in construction and building of our research process. Another topic which is very important from philosophical principles point of view, it's correlation. not using correlation correctly in our research process and building up with construction, again, can lead us to not correct conclusions. As a result, it will take a longer time to get some correct conclusions. One thing which we need to remember, that correlation does not apply causation. So let's have a look several examples, try to understand what I mean. This is classical example. When we start to look on the graphs, ice cream sales and number of sharks attack on swimmers are correlated. Why do we say this? Because we started to plot along the months which we have, we started to plot the number of ice cream sales and we started to plot the number of shark attacks. Looking on the graphs, can you see? The graph of sharks has almost the same behavior as the graph on ice cream sales. Looking on this particular data, I will be started to say that these two particular elements, they are correlated to each other. Let's have a look at another example. Skirt length and stock prices are highly correlated. As stock prices go up, the skirt lengths got shorter. Again, we may have historical data about the stock prices going up. If we plot below the length of the skirts worn by women, we may say that our data is correlated. The stock prices go down, the length of the dresses are very long. The stock prices go up, the length of the dresses and skirts, they go shorter. We could be saying that based on this data, we have correlation between stock prices and the length of our skirts in the woman. Now, we have a look very well about what correlation means, how some data which have very similar behavior, we would be saying that they correlate, even though that it makes you smile when I say that the length of a skirt correlate to the stock prices. It makes you smile because we are not looking the reason why it's happening, why it's basically the stock markets go up, why the skirt markets are going up. We can say that the data, they repeat each other, but we cannot say why it's happening. And in this particular case, we need to start to have a look at another issue, which is called causation. Causation, it tells us why the reasoning for this is basically it's free relationship which can be taken or mistaken for causation. First, causation will be changes in X cause changes in Y. For example, football weekends cause heavier traffic, more food sales, and so on. Common response will be, but X and Y respond to the changes in some unobserved variable. All three of our examples are examples of common response. Basically, when we start to speak about correlation, we are started to speak about observed variables. Variables we started to record based on our data. Because the reasons of behavior of these variables in exactly the same way, it's completely different can be than one correlation goes against another one. And this will be lies inside of causation. For example, if I start to have a look, I have two observed variables, which is shark attacks on swimmers and sales of ice cream. These are two observed variables. But the reason why they correlate with each other is not because they depend on each other. It's because all this is happening during summer. We started to introduce one more variable. It's unobserved variable, which is basically timeline to say that shark attacks on swimmers occurs in summer. Ice cream sales occurs in summer. Basically, summer by itself, the period of warm weather, will cause increase in sales of ice cream, and it will cause increase in number of shock attacks. In this particular case, ice cream sales and shock attack were correlated, they are observed variables. But summer is our unobserved variables which become and introduces the relationship of causation. When we start to analyze our data, it is extremely important to understand the relationship between the data you have. Do they have relationship as correlation, or do they have relationship such as causation? Let's have a look at another example. We spoke about the skirt lengths and stock prices. Some of you may be already smiling when I was giving this example, classical example. The problem is, we said that the length of a skirt correlated to the stock prices. But what is the reason why it's happening? Length of the skirts and the stock market, these are our two observed variables, which can define for us some correlation between them. But it doesn't mean they influence one into another one. In other words, we can say that the skirt lengths and stock prices are both controlled by the general attitude of the country, liberal or conservative. In our particular case, we can have our country represented by liberal or conservative. Depending on policies of the government and so on, it would lead causation effect on the length of the skirts and on the stock prices. Again, can you see we have another unobserved variable which introduces causation effect in both cases. Can you see the fact that we are monitoring the data and we are looking at them, it doesn't mean that will provide us a correct conclusion. We need to start to look on the nature of the data, observed variables or unobserved variables, and identify correlation or causation effect. For example, causation and correlation relationship for the data, they will be bringing now more and more the most importance in our case with Internet of Things growing up. When amount of data our society starts to generate and analyze brings us to the next level when it's necessary to analyze the large type of data where influence and causation correlation and causation of data could lead us to correct and not correct the data, especially when we start to speak about building our automatic systems and anything. And in this particular case, correlation and causation will play the most important role. Can you see how philosophical principles which has been lined up for correlation and causation play the most important role in building our research process and making sure that we bring the objective solution? Let's get back to your research papers. By now, you should have 4 research papers in your project. We understand the nature of causation and correlation. We understand what does it mean observed variable and unobserved variable. Can you have a look in your research paper and identify what type of data do you have? What relationship between these data are? Is it correlation? Is it causation? Do you have observed variables and what they are? Do you have unobserved variables and what they are? Please do this for all 4 papers and for your project, the one you have in mind. Another important case which we need to consider in terms of philosophical principles is validity and generalization. One thing which is quite important to understand is generalization preserved validity. It means when we start to generalize to a specific level, our validity, validations, and the truthness of our solutions remains the same. But the most important, generalization preserved global truth, but doesn't preserve satisfaction. When we start to look in type of validity, they very much depends on the type of research you are doing. Is it descriptive research? interpretive, theoretical, evaluative? Do you use generalizability? Depending on the type of research you are doing, the appropriate type of validity is need to be used. Now, in this particular lecture, we focus on analysis of 6 main philosophical principles, and we were looking on these philosophical principles from a research process analysis point of view. We started to understand that despite the fact that a lot of papers has been written in particular method, methodological construction of our research process brings us one of the key issues of our success of doing research. We need to take care to ensure that we are preserving our objectivity in our research process at each stage of this process. We need to ensure that we are looking on the relationship between the data, correlation, causation. We need to double check and identify whatever validity we need. If we start to apply all these philosophical principles into our papers and learn to analyze each of these paper from point of view I just showed you, it will bring you very powerful tool to understand how strong or weak methodological basis of building up particular research method. And this is something we start to learn next lecture. Hope to see you soon. Bye.